All right, let's dive into this deep dive you wanted to do today. You're obviously interested in men's rights and specifically, how to navigate a world where it feels like, society might be stacked against you.
Yeah.
This book, you sent over really digs into that. And it looks like it's really speaking to a lot of men who feel like they're getting a raw deal.
It definitely doesn't hold back.
Yeah.
One thing that really struck me was how the book frames the whole issue.
Yeah.
It argues that men today are facing an uphill battle, not just in terms of outright discrimination, but in those subtle shifts in how society and institutions operate.
Okay, so break that down for me a little.
Yeah.
What do you mean by these subtle shifts?
Well, let's take the workplace as an example.
Sure.
The book argues that these diversity initiatives, while they sound positive on the surface, can actually put men at a disadvantage, especially white men. It claims that these programs can basically become like quota systems where men are passed over for promotions or opportunities, even if they are, more qualified on paper.
That's an interesting perspective that you don't often hear in mainstream discussions about equality.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, is this book making you rethink some of your own assumptions about things?
It's definitely challenging conventional thinking.
Yeah.
And it's not just limited to the workplace.
Okay.
It also goes into education, claiming that policies influenced by feminism have led to a decline in how boys are doing academically. It even cites Sweden as an example, where boys are now 50% more likely to fail in school than girls.
50%? Wow, that's a pretty stark statistic.
It is.
Is the book saying that feminism is entirely to blame for this, or are there other things going on?
It's not saying feminism is the sole cause.
Okay.
But it does argue that some policies aimed at empowering girls have unintentionally created a learning environment that doesn't work as well for boys.
Yeah.
For example, it claims that some teaching methods might be more suited to how girls learn, leaving boys feeling left out and falling behind.
So it's not about taking away opportunities from girls, but recognizing that boys might need a different approach to thrive in education.
Exactly. The book is pushing for a more, nuanced understanding of how gender differences play out in education and moving away from this one-size-fits-all approach.
Okay, now things get really interesting when the book dives into the legal system, specifically family court. It paints a picture of family court as like this minefield for men.
Right. The book is pretty critical of what it sees as a bias against men in family court, particularly when it comes to divorce and child custody. It argues that the system tends to favor mothers, even in cases where fathers are, actively involved in capable parents.
That's a pretty serious. What kind of evidence does the book present to back that up?
Well, it points to a number of things, including this thing called the tender years doctrine, which is this outdated legal principle that assumes young children are automatically better off with their mothers, regardless of the father's capability. It also criticizes no-fault divorce laws, arguing that they've made it easier for women to initiate divorce without consequences, leaving men feeling powerless and vulnerable.
So basically, the book is saying that men are going into family court already at a disadvantage, both legally and emotional.
That's the main argument.
Okay.
And it goes beyond custody battles, too. The book highlights the financial burden that divorce often puts on men, with alimony and child support payments that can be crushing, even if they're determined fairly. It argues that the system often focuses on the woman's financial needs without properly considering the man's financial situation.
It was all pretty bleak. Does the book offer any advice for men who are facing these challenges?
It does.
Okay.
It's not just about complaint. It's very action-oriented.
Okay.
It advises men to be proactive, understand their rights, and to fight for what they believe in. It stresses the importance of keeping good records, hiring a good lawyer, and building a strong support network.
Support network. Okay, I think this is where things might start clicking for a lot of guys out there.
Right.
It's one thing to read about these issues, but it's another to actually feel like you're not alone in going through them.
Absolutely. The book really emphasizes the power of brotherhood, arguing that men need to connect with each other, share their experiences, and support each other through these tough times. It highlights the rise of the men's rights movement. And these online communities, like the subreddit you mentioned, has vital platforms for men to find that sense of solidarity and shared purpose.
That makes a lot of sense when you feel like the system is against you. Finding a community that gets what you're going through can be incredibly empowering.
It can.
It's like having a band of brothers to stand with you in the trenches.
Exactly. The book drives home the point that men are stronger together, that by sharing their stories and supporting each other, they can overcome these challenges and build a better future for themselves and future generations.
Now, I'm curious about this idea of reclaiming masculinity that the book talks about.
Okay.
It sounds like it's pushing back against that whole toxic masculinity thing we hear so much about.
You're right. The book completely rejects the concept of toxic masculinity.
Okay.
It argues that it's a feminist idea designed to make traditional male traits seem bad and to shame men for just being men. It argues that qualities like strength, assertiveness, even risk-taking aren't inherently negative, but are essential for men to succeed and contribute to society.
So it's not about denying that some male behaviors can be harmful, right?
No.
It's about recognizing that there are also good aspects to traditional masculinity worth preserving.
Exactly. The book argues that men need to reclaim these positive aspects, to embrace their masculinity without shame or apology, and to channel their energy in positive ways.
It's interesting that the book even uses the term warrior mentality in a positive light.
Yeah.
That's a term that often gets thrown around negatively, but the book seems to be reframing it as a mindset of resilience and strategic thinking that men can use to overcome obstacles.
Exactly. It's about embracing that warrior's strength and but channeling it towards goals like building a successful career, protecting their family, or contributing to their community.
It almost sounds like the book is trying to revive a sense of honor and purpose among men, a sense that's maybe been lost in modern society.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. The book argues that men are searching for meaning and purpose, and they can find it by embracing those good parts of their masculinity and using their strengths to make a positive impact.
I know we've barely scratched the surface of this book, but I can already see why it's hitting home with men who are feeling disillusioned or marginalized. It's like it's giving them a way to express their frustration and a framework for understanding their experience.
And it's not just about understanding. The book is a call to action. It's urging men to not just sit back and complain, but to take charge of their lives, build a better future for themselves and their family.
All right, so we've talked about a lot here. Challenges in the workplace, the family court system, the power of brotherhood, claiming masculinity. It feels like we're just getting started, though. There's so much more to uncover here.
There is, definitely.
Okay, well, buckle up, everyone.
Yeah.
We're going in deep.
We are. Let's get back to that idea of the gynocracy you brought up.
Yeah, okay.
It's a term you hear a lot in men's rights discussions. And this book really dives deep into it.
I think it's something that a lot of men in our audience are wrestling with. This idea that society has shifted to favor women, often at the expense of men.
The book argues that you can see this shift towards a gynocracy in all sorts of places in society. Like it talks about hiring practices where women might be given preferential treatment, even if a man is equally or even more qualified.
Yeah, I can see how that would be frustrating, especially when you're competing for jobs. But isn't that just trying to balance things out after, you know, centuries of men dominating the workforce?
The book acknowledges that there's historical inequality for sure, but it says the pendulum has swung too far in the other direction. It claims men are now facing a new kind of discrimination, one that's often disguised as progress.
So it's not about denying that women have faced discrimination, right? It's about recognizing that the solutions may have created new problems for men.
That's the point. The book wants a more balanced approach, one that acknowledges the needs and challenges of both genders. It even talks about benevolent sexism.
Benevolent sexism,
where actions that seem positive towards women actually reinforce traditional gender roles and undermine true equality.
Give me an example of what the book considers benevolent sexism.
Well, think about things like expecting men to always pay for dates. Or to give up their seats for women on the bus or train. These gestures might seem polite on the surface, but the book argues they keep this idea going that women are weaker or more dependent on men.
That's interesting. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
It's like these chivalrous acts, even if they're well-intentioned, could actually be part of the problem.
That's the argument. The book says true equality means treating men and women as equals in everything, not just jobs or legal matters.
Let's move on to another controversial topic the book brings up.
The
marriage strike. I know a lot of men in our audience are choosing not to get married, and this book seems to be validating their concern.
The book presents the marriage strike as a logical response to the risks and disadvantages of marriage for men. It argues that men are hesitant to get married because they see it as a potential trap that could lead to financial ruin, emotional distress, and even losing their kids in a divorce.
So it's not that men don't want love or family, right? They're just afraid of what could happen if things go sour.
Exactly. That's a really important point. The book highlights how divorce laws often favor women, leaving men with alimony and child support payments. That can be financially devastating. It also argues that family courts are often biased against fathers when it comes to custody decisions.
I know that's a huge worry for a lot of men listening. They see these stories of men losing their homes, savings, even relationships with their kids after divorce. And it makes them really hesitant to get married.
The book doesn't shy away from these realities. It tells men to be aware of the risks, to protect themselves legally and financially, and even consider other relationship models that might be more fair.
Okay, so we've talked about the challenges for men in the workplace, the legal system, even in relationships. Now let's talk about a space where men are finding support and connection, the manosphere.
The book has a really interesting take on the manosphere. It sees the good things about this online world. It sees it as a place for men to connect with others who think like them, to share what they're going through and find a sense of belonging.
I think the manosphere has been a lifeline for a lot of men who feel like they're not being heard in mainstream society. It's a place where they can talk about their frustrations, their worries, their perspectives without being judged or censored.
The book recognizes that. It also points out how the manosphere is raising awareness about issues that affect men, like male suicide rates, the challenges of being a father, and the biases men face in different parts of life.
It's like a countercultural movement, right? Pushing back against this dominant narrative that portrays men as privileged and powerful while ignoring the real struggles so many men face.
Exactly. The book sees the manosphere as a necessary correction, a place where men can challenge the status quo, reclaim their masculinity, and fight for their rights.
But it seems to acknowledge the potential downsides of the manosphere too, right?
It does. The book warns against falling into an echo chamber of negativity or resentment. It says it's important to use the manosphere for growth and positive change, not just for complaining or blaming women.
It's a tricky balance.
It is.
On one hand, it can be validating and supportive for men who feel marginalized. But on the other hand, it could become a breeding ground for anger and misogyny if it's not approached in a healthy way.
The book encourages men to use the manosphere wisely, to have thoughtful conversations, challenge their own biases, and channel their energy into positive action.
Okay, now let's shift gears a bit and talk about one of the most controversial things the book gets into, its take on traditional marriage.
The book is very critical of marriage, especially as it exists now in Western society. It argues that marriage has become really risky for men, often leading to financial ruin and emotional distress, especially if there's a divorce.
I think a lot of men are starting to understand the realities of divorce laws and how they can be devastating for men financially.
The book doesn't sugarcoat it. It even calls marriage a trap designed to benefit women at the expense of men. It talks about the high divorce rates, the burden of alimony and child support, and the risk of men losing custody of their children in a system it claims is often biased against them.
I know this is a sensitive topic.
It is.
But it's a conversation we need to have. Men are increasingly wary of getting married because they see the potential downsides. And this book is acknowledging those concerns.
The book isn't saying men should avoid relationships, but it is urging them to be careful, understand the risks, and protect themselves legally and financially.
So it's about going into marriage with your eyes wide open.
Exactly.
Not just blindly following societal expectations or romantic notions.
The book encourages men to be realistic about the challenges of marriage, to choose their partners carefully, and consider all the possible consequences before making that commitment.
If a man decides marriage isn't the right path for him.
The book suggests there are other ways to build meaningful relationships in family, whether it's cohabitating, committed partnership, or different family structures altogether. It's about finding what works for you and not feeling pressured to conform to what society says you should do.
Let's talk about another challenging issue the book addresses, how feminism has affected men's lives.
The book argues that while feminism has definitely made progress for women, it's also had unintended consequences for men.
This is where things can get heated. Because some people see any criticism of feminism as an attack on women's rights.
The book is very clear. It's not denying the importance of gender equality or dismissing the struggles women have faced, but it's pushing for a more nuanced understanding of how certain feminist policies or ideas might have had a negative impact on men.
So it's not about being anti-feminist. It's about having an honest honest conversation about how the pursuit of gender equality might have unintentionally created new problems for men.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
The book explores those challenges in detail, from the workplace to family courts to the cultural stories that shape our understanding of what it means to be a man.
Give me a specific example of how the book says feminism has negatively impacted men.
Well, one example is how toxic masculinity has become this catch-all term to condemn any behavior that doesn't fit a very narrow definition of what's acceptable for men.
Right.
The book argues that this idea has created a climate of fear and shame for men, making them afraid to express their emotions, their assertiveness, even their natural instincts.
So it's not about condoning bad behavior, right? It's about recognizing that not all expressions of masculinity are toxic or harmful.
Exactly. The book argues that there are good things about traditional masculinity that are worth saving, like strength, courage, being protective, and having a sense of honor. It encourages men to reclaim these qualities, to embrace their masculinity without shame and channel their energy towards positive things.
It sounds like the book is trying to find a balance.
It is.
Recognizing both the progress feminism has made and the potential downsides for men.
Exactly. It's not about taking sides or demonizing either feminism or men's rights.
Right.
It's about having an open and honest conversation about the complex realities of how men and women interact in the 21st century.
And it's about finding solutions that work for everybody, right? That promote true equality and create a society where both men and women can thrive.
This section of the book really resonated with me.
It
talks about men's mental health. Something that's often ignored or stigmatized.
It's true. Men are often told to just man up and bottle up their feelings, which can have really bad consequences.
The book argues that men are facing a mental health crisis, driven by pressure from society, unrealistic expectations, and a lack of support. It highlights those alarming rates of male suicide, depression, substance abuse, and it challenges that traditional stoic ideal of masculinity that keeps men from asking for help.
It's a powerful message. It's telling men that it's okay to not be okay. That seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness.
The book encourages men to be more open about their feelings, to build strong support network, and to get professional help when they need it. It also emphasizes finding healthy ways to deal with their emotions, whether that's through exercise, creative stuff, or just spending time in nature.
It's about taking care of your mental and emotional well-being, just like you would your physical health.
Exactly. The book stresses that men don't have to suffer in silence. There are resources out there, people who care. And there's hope for healing and recovery.
I'm seeing a pattern here. This book isn't just about pointing out the problem.
No.
It's about giving men the tools to find solutions, to take charge of their lives and create a better future for themselves.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another key idea in the book, the red pill.
The red pill.
It's a metaphor from the movie The Matrix. It represents choosing to see the world as it really is, even if that reality is tough or unpleasant.
I think most of our listeners are familiar with the red pill idea. It's about waking up to the realities of how men and women interact, the societal biases that often favor women, and the ways men can be disadvantaged or even taken advantage of.
The book really digs into the red pill philosophy, exploring different aspects of this awakening, from the legal system to how the media portrays men, to the social expectations that can undermine men's well-being.
It's like peeling back the layers of how we're conditioned by society to see the truth, even if it's hard to swallow.
The book doesn't hide the potential downsides of the red pill either. It acknowledges that some men can become angry or resentful, even misogynistic after taking the red pill.
It's easy to fall into a victim mentality.
It is.
Or to blame women for all of men's problems.
The book warns against that. It says it's important to use the red pill for positive change, not as an excuse to dwell on negativity or attack others. It encourages men to channel their energy constructively, to use their new awareness to improve their own lives, and to fight for a more fair and just society.
So it's about taking that red pill awareness and using it to empower yourself, to make good changes in your own life, and to advocate for a better future for all men.
Exactly. It's about becoming the hero of your own story, not the victim.
So we've talked about the red pill, which is about waking up to how the world really is. But what about the blue pill? What does the book say about that?
In this book, the blue pill represents choosing to stay ignorant, to live in this blissful state of not knowing. It's the comfort of believing the world is fair, that men and women are treated equally, and that if you work hard and follow the rules, you'll be fine. The book argues that the blue pill is a dangerous illusion, one that traps men in a cycle of denial and self-sabotage. It says that men who hold on to the blue pill are often blind to the ways they're being disadvantaged, exploited, even manipulated.
It's like living in a fantasy world where you're unaware of the forces working against you.
The book encourages men to reject the blue pill, to face the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it is, and use that knowledge to empower themselves.
So it's a call to wake up, see the world clearly, and take control of your own destiny.
Exactly. The book offers a path to liberation, a way for men to break free from that blue pill illusion and embrace a more authentic and empowering way of being a man. It encourages men to become aware of how they've been conditioned, to challenge those limiting beliefs, and create a new set of values that align with their true selves.
It's a journey of self-discovery. Right.
It is.
Shedding those layers of social programming and embracing your true potential.
The book gives practical advice for men who are ready for that journey, offering strategies for building self-awareness, developing emotional intelligence, and navigating relationships in a more genuine and fulfilling way.
It's like a roadmap to a more conscious and empowered masculinity, a guide to becoming the man you were always meant to be.
And that journey often begins with understanding the sexual marketplace, something the book goes into quite a bit.
I know that term can make some people squirm, but it's a reality we can't really ignore.
The sexual marketplace is basically a way to describe the dynamics of attraction and choosing a mate. It's not about reducing human relationships to cold transactions, but it's about acknowledging that certain factors influence who we're drawn to and why.
Yeah, it's like understand the rules of the game so you can play strategically and improve your chances.
The book argues that men need to be aware of the things that determine their value in this marketplace.
Like what?
Things like physical attractiveness, social status, personality traits.
So not just judging people on the surface, but understanding what drives attraction and mate selection.
The book encourages men to invest in themselves, improve their physical health, develop their social skills, and cultivate their character. Not just to attract a partner, but to become the best versions of themselves.
It's about leveling up, right? Becoming the most attractive and desirable version of yourself.
The book emphasizes that the sexual marketplace isn't fixed. A man's value can change over time based on his actions, achievements, even personal growth.
So it's a message of empowerment.
It is.
Telling men they're not stuck where they are. They can improve their standing by working on themselves and becoming their best selves.
And that message goes beyond dating and relationships. It's about taking control of your life, defining success on your own terms, and going after your goals with everything you've got.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. The challenges men face in this Chinocracy, importance of brotherhood, that red pill awakening. I'm hearing a theme of resilience, of men taking charge of their lives and building a better future for themselves.
You got it. And that takes us to the last chapter of the book, where it gives men practical advice on how to build a more fulfilling and meaningful life, no matter what obstacles they encounter.
I'm really interested to hear what the book has to say about that. All right, so we're wrapping up this deep dive into this book, and I gotta say, it's been a wild ride. We've talked about some really tough stuff. But I think the biggest takeaway is this idea of men taking charge and creating a better future for themselves.
This book isn't about whining, It's about giving men the tools to find solutions and build a life that's, fulfilling and has real meaning.
So let's get into that. What does the book suggest men can actually do to create that better future?
One of the core messages is that men have to define success on their own terms, find their own path, and really go after what they're passionate about.
It's easy to get caught up in what society expects, right?
Absolutely.
To feel like you got to follow a certain script to be considered successful.
The book pushes back on that. It says, break free from the mold, question those expectations, and figure out what actually matters to you. It even suggests that men consider different career paths, maybe alternative lifestyles. That's what will truly make them happy.
So it's about finding your definition of success.
Exactly.
Not letting society dictate it.
It's about making a life that lines up with your values, your passions, your own goals.
And the book also talks a lot about finding purpose and meaning.
Absolutely.
What's it say about that?
Well, it suggests men can find that purpose in all different parts of their lives, whether it's their job, relationships, hobbies, or what they give back to their community.
Okay.
It's about figuring out what gives your life meaning, what makes you feel like you're making a real difference.
Right, like you're contributing something.
The book encourages men to really get in touch with their values, find what matters to them, and then, actually live a life that reflects those values.
Living with intention, making each day count, and leaving something behind, a legacy,
Right, one you can be proud of.
This book, man, it's given us a lot to think about.
It has.
It's challenged some of my own assumptions.
Yeah.
Made me question things I just kind of always accepted, And honestly, it's given me a whole new perspective on what men are dealing with today.
It's a really thought-provoking book. And for anyone listening who's intrigued and wants to dig into these ideas further, the book is available on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
So if this deep dive has piqued your interest, I definitely recommend checking it out. It could change your whole outlook.
Keep learning, keep asking those tough questions, and keep moving forward.
Absolutely. And remember, guys, you're not alone in this.